Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start our class with some mantras. Om Pathaye Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayan Swayam Vyasen Gratitam Puran Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritvarshane Bhagavati Mashtadashadhyayane Amatvam Anusandhami Bhagavad Gite Bhavdveshane Namo Astu Te Vyasa Vishal Buddhe Kul Arvind Ayat Patra Netar येन तव्या भारत तैल पूर्णः प्रज्वलितो ज्ञानमया प्रदीपः परपान पारी जाताये तोत्रवेत्र एकपाने ज्ञान मुद्राये कृष्णाय गीता अमृतदुहे नमः सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपाल नंदना पार्थो वत्सा सुधीर भोक्ता दुग्धम गीता अमृतम महत वसुदेव सुतम देवम कंस चानूरमर्दनम देवकी परमानंदम कृष्णम वंदे जगद्गुरुम भीष्म द्रोण तटा जयद्रथ जला गांधार नीलोत्पला शल्य ग्रावती कृपेन वाहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थाम विकर्ण घोरमकरा दुर्योधन अवर्तनी सोतीर्ना खलु पांडवै रन नदी कैवर्तका केशवः पाराशरे वत्सरोजमलम गीता अर्थगंधोटकम नानाख्यानक केसरम हरिकथा संबोधन अबोधितम लोके सज्जन षटपदय रह रह पेपिये मानम मुदा भूयाद भारत पंकजम कलिमल प्रध्वंसी न श्रेयसे मूकम करोति वाचालम पंगुम लंघ्यते गिरिम यत्कृपातमं वंदे परमानंद माधवम यम ब्रह्म वरुण इंद्र रुद्र मरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यस्तवे वेदै सांग पदक्रमोपनिषदै गायन्ति यम सामगा ध्यानवस्थितगतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यम योगिनो यस्यन्तं न विदुषुर असुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः. There are many reasons we start these studies with the mantras, mantra recitation. One of the reasons is to bring our scattered mind into full concentration. Okay, so that's why it's a tradition to say these mantras. So in this class, we are trying to understand Bhagavad Gita chapter by chapter. And we are going to do the 8th chapter today, Akshar Brahm Yog. That is the name of this chapter, the title of this chapter. Brahm word is for God, absolute reality, the truth, Brahm. There's only one. Forms can be many, but God is only one, Brahm. And Akshar means something which can never be destroyed, imperishable, eternal. So Brahma is eternal. This is what we're going to learn in this chapter. So in the earlier chapters, we learned about action also, the karma, knowledge, and how the knowledge becomes wisdom with the practice, with the sadhana. And Lord Krishna also gave us the glorification of the man of wisdom. And he declared that he is perfect not only because of his special knowledge and experience of the self, but also because he becomes a well-integrated personality at all levels of his existence and even the context in the world. That means the way the person behaves, the way that yogi walks, the way the yogi talks, it's a well-integrated personality. And this kind of a person proves himself to be a man of godly efficiency and balance in all the situations, not only in front of the altar, not only when the Gita is present, in the tough situations also, in all situations, all conditions, and all times, and all places. This is what Lord Krishna has been telling us. But we know the mere theoretical explanation cannot encourage a man of action. And Arjun is a person who is a man of action, highly active. So that's why he keeps on asking more and more questions so that he can experience all this, just not only memorize all this. And we saw the last chapter concluded with a statement that a man of wisdom not only realizes the absolute essence that sustains the world, but he also at once comes to master the world of objects, the organs of perceptions and actions, and instruments of comprehension. And he becomes a dynamic doer. So it was made more and more clear in all these chapters, but still Arjun has some questions. And this is what we see in our Upanishads also, in Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures from the Hindu Dharma. Questions are encouraged. Questioning and re-questioning. It's called Prashan and Pariprashan. This is the style. So now Arjun says in the very first verse of this chapter, in fact, it's not just a one question, there are several questions in this verse. He says, what is Brahma? Because Brahm word was used. What is Adhyatma? What is Karma? What is declared to be Adhibhuta? And what is Adhideva said to be? And in the second verse, he says, who and how is Adhiyagya here in this body? And how at the time of death are you to be known by the self-controlled? Because this is one of the promise Lord Krishna made. That if you remember me at the time of the death, you come to me. So this chapter opens up with the seekers questioning his teacher with a view to get an exact definitions. That's why these questions are very exact questions. Because these are the terms which Lord Krishna used towards the end of the last chapter. So not only Arjun is asking the explanation of the terms, he is also anxious to know how exactly one can realize the self at the time of death. And death is only the death of the body, end of the body, and which is certain. Lord Krishna mentioned that in the previous chapters, that this world, this physical world is perishable. Anybody who's born will die. Any plant who has grown will definitely die also. Eternal is only the Atma, which is part of Brahman. So Lord Krishna exhaustively explaining or giving the answers to these questions. Verse number 3, he says, Brahm is imperishable, the supreme, and his essential nature is called self-knowledge, adhyatma. The creative force that causes beings to spring forth into manifestation is called karma. And the adhibhut really means the elements. Earth, water, fire, air, space. Those 5 elements are called adhibhut. He says they constitute my perishable nature. So it's not somebody else's. It's part of God, but that part perishes. And the indweller or the essence is the Adhideva. And I alone am the Adhiyagya here in this body, O noblest of the embodied. So the term Brahma indicates the one changeless, imperishable, subjective essence behind the phenomenal world. Okay, Brahma. And its presence in each individual body is called Adhyatma. So when we say this is a Adhyatma knowledge or Adhyatma Vidya, that is pertaining to the soul, the Atma, self. There's so many different words we use, but in essence, it's the same thing. So expressing itself through a given embodiment. Sure, it seems like it's conditioned by the body, but the Atma is Adhyatma. And in the definition of karma, Lord Krishna says, we do see both action and spiritual glory happily wedded together. The creative force that causes beings and things to spring into existence is called karma. So that means work is not just the turnover. Because turnover can be ordered and brought about by sheer labor. But when we say karma, that's something deeper, subtler, diviner. So the creative urge that is behind every active intellect and which ultimately fulfills itself in the creation of things and beings, that subtle spiritual strength is called karma. And Adhibhut, as I said earlier, it's the perishable existence. Or another term we use for this is Prakriti. So the world of Prakriti is called Adhibhut, the whole world of phenomena of the universe. So the equipment of cognition, feeling, perception constitute the perishable factors in us. And Adhidev, all the presiding deities of the sense organs. So that means it's not just the organ of the eye, but it's the power to see, that is Adhidev, power to hear, power to speak, and the power of the mind, power of the intellect. They are called Devatas. Remember that. Without that power, we cannot learn. Without that power, we cannot even say a word. These are all Adhideva. And Adhiyagya, he says, in this body, I alone am Adhiyagya. One vital factor that dominates the entire activity in the self. Or another way, you can say the principle of life is Adhiyagya. So the Lord Krishna is on the whole suggesting that the eternal self alone is the real, and that all else is a delusory superimposition upon it. So the reality is the Atma, which is nothing but Brahm, part of Brahm. And what happens to one who leaves the body in the awareness of the self? So by saying the name Om, that really means you are aware of who you are in reality. If you leave this body like that, what happens? He says, leaving the body, remembering me alone. Me means the Atma or Paramatma. At the time of his death, he attains my being. There is no doubt about it. This is what he says in verse number 5. No doubt about it. So this last powerful willing, determined by the last thought, decides his destinies in the future. That kind of a mind will take us to that place. So he says there's no arguments about it. Whosoever at the end leaves the body, thinking of any being, to that being only he goes. Why? He says because of his constant thought of that being. So that means the mind or your thoughts have that kind of a power. It takes you to that place. Don't we say, as you think, so you become? Thoughts guide all our actions. So even at the end of this life, when we are ready to leave this body, our thoughts will take us to that place. So Shri Krishna's instructions over here, what should we do all through our life? In the next verse, because we don't know when we're going to leave this body. Even though we all know we will leave the body, but we don't know when we're going to leave the body. So that's why Lord Krishna in verse number 7, he says, therefore, at all times, remember me and fight. Fight over here means to do your duty. Because he's talking to Arjuna. So Arjuna was in the middle of the war over there and he was supposed to fight. As a Kshatriya, as a warrior, that was his duty at that point. But for us, we should remember that this fight word means do your duties. Therefore, at all times, remember me and fight with mind and intellect fixed or absorbed in me. You shall doubtless come to me alone. Because ultimate goal is to become one with God. So he is telling us clearly how to attain that. And it's not only at the end of our life we will start doing it. We got to start doing it right now. Whether we are cleaning the floor, whether we are teaching, or whether we are learning, whether we are driving the car, whether we are going to sleep, or we are eating food, bring the thoughts of God in your mind. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmar yudhecha may arpit manobhuti ma mev ishyasi asankshyam. I'm sure you've heard this verse, so often repeated. An individual's life must be lived with a constant background music of the divine awareness. That's what he's telling us. Sometimes we understand only half of this verse. We think he says, remember me only, and we just sit in the temple and we want to remember him. He says, no, do your duties also. Do not shirk your duties. Absorb your mind and intellect into me. So very simple instructions. If we follow these instructions of this great Guru, we will not only have a better standard of living, but we can raise the standard of life. Our whole life can become divinized. When once the mental equipment gets absorbed in the self, through the process of constant contemplation on the self, single-minded devotion, he says, you'll come to me. It's a very simple message he's giving. But doing we must do. With the mind not moving towards any other thing, he says in verse number 8. Made it steadfast by the method of habitual meditation and constantly meditating on the Supreme Purush, he goes to him. So what he's saying is start meditating at least every day for a few minutes. You will see the joy you feel, the peace you feel. It will stay with you for the rest of the day also. But make it a habit of meditating a few minutes a day at least. He says, by this practice, the devotee develops a single pointed of the mind. See, single pointedness of the mind helps us in our meditation. It helps us in our worldly duties also. And we learn how to integrate our intellect also. With integrated mind, whatever individual meditates upon intensively, he must come to gain it soon enough. What are the special qualities of Brahma. Because we know something or anything with the help of the qualities. So what are those qualities? Because if we are supposed to constantly meditate on Brahm all the time or on the self, what are the qualities? What are we think about? Because initially we need to think about it. He says, he is omniscient, ancient, the ruler of the whole world. These qualities, these are almost like arrows he's pointing towards God. We cannot define God, but we can at least talk about the qualities of God. This is what he's doing in verse number 9. Omniscient, ancient, the ruler of the whole world, minuter than the atom. So it's so small. The nourisher of all, the form inconceivable, effulgent like the sun, beyond the darkness of ignorance. Because our intellect cannot concentrate merely on a name. No consistent contemplation is possible just on the name alone. That's why Lord Krishna is providing a sufficient material in the line of contemplation to be undertaken by the meditator. So these qualifying terms, and there are so many more other terms also. So as I said earlier, we are not defining God. We are only pointing towards God. At the time of death, with an unshaken mind full of devotion by the power of yoga, fixing the whole pran between the two eyebrows, the seeker reaches the supreme Purush. This is verse number 10. So when we make ourselves practice this meditation every day on this supreme, omniscient Brahman, this is what happens at the end of the life also. And then as an introduction to the meditation upon Om, the following verse is given, verse number 11. Om, because Om is a sound or a name for God by the Vedic seers. Om. It's an eternal sound going on in the entire universe. That which is declared imperishable by the Veda knowers, that into which the self-controlled and desire-freed enter, that desiring which brahmacharya is practiced, that goal I will declare to you in brief. So goal, the supreme goal, the rest of them are the means he's talking about. So this verse indicates how a person can be assured of an easy path while moving ahead on the track of meditation. We got to be very careful. We got to avoid all extrovert desires. Because extrovert desires, they cater to our sensuous appetites. But we have to practice meditation sincerely, consistently, with enough self-effort. The word which he uses in this verse is vitrag. Vitrag. Vit means let go. Rag means the attachment. In fact, we see this term mentioned many times by Lord Krishna, vitrag. It's a healthy detachment through right knowledge. Vitrag. So it's not a detachment when you cannot have something, you detach. It's a through the right knowledge. What is eternal? What is not? What is good? What is not? What is temporary? What is permanent? That is the right knowledge. So in order to indicate what the early stages of upasanas as well as the results, we have some more verses over here. Verse number 12, he says, having closed all gates, having confined the mind in the heart, having fixed the life breath in the head, engaged in the practice of concentration, uttering the one-syllabled Om, the symbol of Brahma, and remembering me, he who departs, leaving the body, attains the supreme goal. Beautiful technique he is giving it to us, because it's not only when we are ready to leave this body, even when we do our shavasana, during our asana practice, or when we are meditating, we can use this technique. The practice of concentration can most effectively be undertaken and efficiently continued when these three necessary conditions are fulfilled by the meditator. What are these three conditions? Number one, controlling all the senses. And what are the senses? Our eyes, our ears, our nose, our touch, and the taste. These are the five senses. These are the gateway on our body. Through these gateways, the information comes in. So we got to close it during the meditation. Don't let anything else come in. Now you might say that, no, we play the music when we meditate. If you are playing the music, your ears are listening. They are listening the sound of Om. In the earlier stages of meditation, that's okay. But later on, you will see that you don't like to play that either. You would like to listen to the Om which is going on inside you. So controlling all the senses. Number two condition is confining the mind in the heart. What does it really mean? Because philosophically, sometimes these terms are used for something different. There is a heart in our physical body. That's not what he's talking about. Philosophically, heart is a conceptual center in the mind where all the positive thoughts are coming from. Noble thoughts of love and tenderness, kindness and charity, devotion and surrender. When they constantly springing up, that is called, you're confining the mind into the heart. So much positivity is springing up. Because we all know the negative thoughts are those that bring into the mind storms, agitations, restlessness. If those thoughts are coming, your mind is not confined in the heart. Your mind is confined in the heart only when all those positive thoughts are there. So this is the sadhana we need to do. And the third condition he's telling us, drawing the prana into the head. What does it mean? That means totally engaging the mind, intellect in the contemplation of the self. Total withdrawal of the intellect from all its identifications with the knower. That's what it means. Every meditator who can make an attempt to forgetting his immediate sensual surroundings and surcharged with joy and contentment, and can bring his mind under the total control of his discriminative intellect, which is called vivek, can mentally chant Om with ease and with enthusiasm. And you will see, you will observe the rising Om waves within you. This kind of a student is a fit student. This is what we need to work on. Now the question is self-rediscovery so difficult? Equally for all people who are walking the path of meditation? Lord Krishna says, no, it's not. Because most of the time we think that it's so difficult. Lord Krishna says in verse number 14, I am easily attainable. By that ever steadfast yogi who constantly remembers me daily. Not thinking of anything else, O Partha. So that means a daily practice. At that time, think about only God. It could be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending upon the stage of life you are in. If you are retired, not more than that. If you are a student still, little less. If you are a householder, little more than the student. So we got to just keep on increasing. But when we know that we are in the fourth stage in life, constantly, we don't know when we're going to depart. He says, I'm easily attainable. So we got to do our part. Ananya chetsa satam yo mam samarti nityasha. Tasya aham sulbha partha. Sulbha means very easily attainable. Nitya yuktasya yogina. Having attained me, these Mahatmas do not take birth again. And why we don't want to come back here again? He says, because this is a house of pain and is non-eternal. They having reached the highest perfection, moksha. This is a house of pain. Taking birth is painful. Growth is painful. Old age is painful. And death is definitely painful. That's what Lord Krishna is saying, that Mahatmas, these souls who have reached there, they don't need to come back again. The state of no more births is the goal. But while we are here right now, we are supposed to do the sadhana. Do our duties happily. Keep the positive thoughts. Stay content. Remember him. So he told us what kind of a people don't come back. But are there any who come back not reaching the highest? Sure. We are here because we did not reach the highest. He says worlds up to the world of Brahmaji, the creator himself, are subject to rebirth. But he who reaches me has no rebirth. In the Vedas, they talk about the 7 layers up and 7 layers below. Other religions, they talk about like that too. 7th heaven, Satma Asma. So up to the 7th one is Brahma's, creator's place, that realm. Even if you reach up to that, you will have to come back again. But God's place, he says, if you come to me, then you don't. So this is a theory of gradual liberation. Krama Mukti, which is called. So slowly we just move up and up and up. So those who have not reached the realm of creator, even the lower realms, they will come back to, or even the lower 7 below also. And we often talk about how long Brahma lives. See, our days and years and life, so day is 24 hours, which has the night and the day both. Then we have months and the years, then average life. Even though the Vedas, they say we should live up to 100 years, but 70, 80 years of life, then we are gone. Brahma lives a lot longer than that. Okay, so Brahma's life is calculated in Kalapa. That's a 1 day of Brahma. And Kalapa is 1,000 Mahayugas. It's a lot longer. He says those people who know the length of the day of Brahma, which ends in 1,000 yugs, and the night also ends in 1,000 yugs, they know day and night. Okay, so you can raise yourself up to that level, but still you'll have to come back. You have not merged into the Supreme yet. That's the point he's trying to make. See, time is truly the measure of the interval between the two experiences. That's what time is. The greater the number of experiences that flood the mind to agitate it, the slower will the time move. We all know that. Tough times, time doesn't move. Good times, we don't even know where time goes. Okay. So in a single given experience, there is no perception of time, just as there's no perception of distance when there's only one point. Remember that. Because sometimes it becomes mind-boggling that how can Brahma lives that long? So 1,000 cycles constitute the daytime of Creator, and an equally long 1,000 cycles constitute the nighttime of the Creator. From the unmanifested, all the manifested proceed at the coming of the day. At the coming of night, they dissolve verily in that alone, which is called the unmanifest. So the same multiple of beings are being born again and again, and are dissolved into the unmanifest helplessly at the coming of night, and they come forth again at the coming of the day. So it's like an unmanifestation and manifestation. Right now we are in this manifested form. We don't know where we were before we took birth. We were in the unmanifested level. After we die, we become unmanifested again. So it's almost like at night we are sleeping, then we wake up. Then we sleep again, then we wake up. That's how it happens. Manifested, unmanifested. Upon what permanent platform does the unmanifested come to play? It's a drama of life. Because this is a drama of life. Lord Krishna says in verse number 20, verily there exists higher than that unmanifested, another unmanifested, which is eternal, which is not destroyed when all beings are destroyed. Okay, so this is what he's talking about, the Brahma. So this unmanifested, the Supreme then, or there another factor which alone is fit to be the goal of life? Lord Krishna says in verse number 21, which is called the unmanifest and the imperishable, they say is the highest. Highest. They who? The knowers. They who reach it never again return. That is my highest state. Because he said, even if you reach up to the Brahma state, you'll have to come back again. But the unmanifest, supreme, that is the highest. Why, after realizing the self, should there be no return? Because question comes to the mind, why don't we come back again from there? Remember, the cause hunting is for the things that happen and not for things that do not happen. So we really cannot find the cause for that. Because nobody anxiously inquires why I'm not in the hospital. If you're not in the hospital, you don't care for that. We want to know only if we go to the hospital, find out why I'm there, the cause hunting. Or my inquiry as to why I'm not in the jail yet never comes to the mind. Only if I end up in the jail, then I'll worry why I did that. So the same way for this. Now in the next couple of verses, he's talking about two paths. Again, there's a philosophical terms used in these couple of verses. He talks about the direct path by which this goal can be reached. This goal means the goal of reaching the unmanifest, highest, supreme. He says the highest Purush is attainable by unswerving devotion to him alone, within whom all beings dwell, by whom all this is pervaded. Devotion. Devotion means love. Love means total identification. That's what love is. Single-pointed devotion. Detachment from the false and growing attachment with the real. That is devotion. And what are the two paths? Verse number 23, he says, now at what time departing, yogis go never to return, as also to return at the time I will tell you. So two paths, he says, I'm going to tell you. Number 24, the path pursued by those who have no return, the people who will not return, the path. Fire, light, daytime, bright fortnight, the 6 months of the northern solstice, following this path, men who know Brahm go to Brahm. So that's why I was telling you this language, you cannot just read it literally and think that if we die in the daytime, we'll not come back. No. Path, this path really means where your consciousness is when you die. If your consciousness is above the heart center, either the Vishuddha chakra, Agya chakra, or to the Sahasrara chakra. So thinking about God and God alone, that's what he's talking about. And as contrasted with the path of non-return, there's a path of sure return, which is a smoke, nighttime, the dark fortnight, also the 6 months of the southern solstice. Attaining by these to the moon, the lunar night, the yogi returns. Moon is, that means the mind. So path of the return, path of the ancestors, or path of the matter. These are so many different terms. So if you're attached to these worldly realms, sure we'll come back to the worldly realm. Based upon our karmas, at the place will be born again. So path of the light and the path of the darkness available for the world are verily thought to be the both eternal. By the one, the path of light, a man goes to return not, and by the other, the path of darkness, he returns again. So that means it's available to all of us, all the time. Which path we want to choose? Path of the light, path of the soul, path of the God, or we want to come back into the path of the attachments to the objects, to the people, to the situations. So two paths are so vividly described here. One path takes us to the brilliant heights of evolutionary success, and the other into the devolutionary sorrow. One is called the path of the moksha, the liberation. The other one is path of the sansar, this coming and going again and again. Or you can say the seekers of the materialism come back again and again, and the seekers of spirituality are moving towards the path of no return. And what exactly is the gain in knowing these two paths and their eternal nature? Why do we have to have this knowledge? Verse number 27, he says, knowing these two paths, no yogi is deluded. That means you have a complete knowledge. And he says, therefore, at all times be steadfast in yoga. Knowledge is important. If we don't have the knowledge, we won't be able to walk on the path. So that's why he says, I'm giving you this knowledge. After knowing these paths, both the paths have the opposing forces that function in our mental life eternally. A true seeker will not fall into any sense of despair. And that's why he's summarizing. He says, be a yogi. So in short, the entire chapter is a divinely powerful plea that we should, even while acting in the world, continuously strive to be one living in the awareness of the divinity, divine. How? Through a process of selfless identification with the eternal, imperishable Purush. In essence, we are the self, the soul, and which is not different than the Brahm. We are part of Brahm. Whatever fruit of merit is declared in the scriptures as springing up from the study of the Vedas, this is the last verse of this chapter, from performance of sacrifices, from practice of austerities, and from charity. Beyond all these goes the yogi. Again, he's not putting down those other paths. All he's saying is, those are the means. Don't make them as goals. Beyond all these goes the yogi who, having known this, the two paths, attains to the supreme essence. Attempts at meditation can integrate the personality 1,000,000 times more easily and quickly than by the other slower processes. That's what he's trying to tell us. When we understand all this, we do practice our meditation devotedly, we develop in ourselves necessary amount of dispassion and discrimination. And again, remember, discrimination means knowing what is true, what is false, what is eternal, what is temporary. Even these can grow who do the meditation regularly and sincerely. So he's encouraging us to meditate on a regular basis, because that's what yogi is. Okay? Because sometimes this term yogi, we think that we do few asanas, we become yogis. Asanas we do so that our body doesn't become weak before its time. Meditation, so that we are one, united. Slowly, we just, maybe for a few minutes a day, we feel united with God. And then when we start feeling that bliss, then we want to do more and more. Then actively we can meditate. We are cooking, we are cleaning, we are talking, but we are internally connected. That's what he's trying to tell us. The last verse, I remember my own Guruji, my father, he used to say it repeatedly. And let me just end the class with that. Vedeshu yagyeshu tapaha sucha eva daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtam atyeti tat sarvam idam viditvaha yogi param sthanam upyati ja atyam. So glory of the yogi is mentioned in this last verse. So let's end the class here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Visheshyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.